Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
Hey listeners, it's Lindsay Smith-Rogers. Today, an insider's look at the challenges facing employees of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Part 1 comes from a main stage conversation in September at the annual Bloomberg American Health Summit between Dr. Josh Sharfstein and Yolanda Jacobs, president of the chapter of the American Federation of Government Employees that represents more than 1,000 CDC employees. In part 2 of today's episode, Dr. Sharfstein catches up with President Jacobs about the most recent dismissals of CDC employees during the federal government shutdown. Let's listen.
Hi, Yolanda.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Now, your chapter has more than 2,000 members?
Yes, we have about 2,300.
Tell me about them.
They consist of employees from the IT fields, health communication specialists, biologists, epidemiologists. We even have a couple of EIS officers. So it's a range of positions across the agency.
And how do they generally feel about the CDC? Why do they go to work there?
Many of them go for the public health mission. Some of them plan it from the time they're in college, undergraduate. They're already thinking about pursuing their master's in public health so that they could come over to the agency and, jump in on the mission.
August 8th, 2025.
Horrible time for us. Horrible.
Tell me about that day.
On that day, a shooter attacked the CDC campus. None of the employees were injured, but we did lose the DeKalb County police officer, David Rose, who attempted to stop the attacker. And since that time, many of the employees have been going through a really stressful period, especially since they've been basically forced to return to the campus where there's still bullet holes in windows, there's still a lot of damage within the buildings, and they're just being asked to swallow the fear and report back to the office. So it's been a really tough time.
It's this incredible tension between feeling like you're going to your job to help people be healthy and feeling under threat at the same time.
Yeah, because a lot of employees, they're not healthy at this time. They're just going through the motions, hoping they still have a job, hoping they can still continue that mission that they signed up for.
It's not as if the rest of the agency has been smooth sailing.
No, it has not been. It's been rough waters.
Yeah, tell me more.
Sometimes it feels like the ship lists to the side and there's no one there to right it. And then other days you think that the seas are just a little bit choppy, but we'll be okay. And then once again, you get that big wave and you list to the other side. So it's been a back and forth, and some of the employees feel like they've just basically been in an abusive relationship and they can't get out.
Wow, that's a vivid image. I mean, you have programs wiped out, funding cuts, then people fired, and then sometimes people come back and then they're fired again.
Exactly.
How do you try to support them at AFG?
We provide a lot of resources. When the attacks happened, one of the first things we did is we sought out experts who handle the aftermath of shootings, the people who are left behind that have to process that trauma. And we brought that trauma expert on board, and we held like a town hall, and then we also offered like private consultations with that mental health therapist. So we provided that. We provided information. We helped guide them through the process for people who would need like reasonable accommodations because mentally they just could not, even imagine going back to the campus. And that takes into consideration, we also had some disabled vets who were already diagnosed with PTSD, who were also being told that they needed to come back into what they now considered a war zone.
Yeah. How much of it was frustration that CDC could have done more to be supportive?
I think that there were a lot of opportunities I don't think that all the opportunities that could have taken were. There were some attempts, but we still feel like it came on the heels of the union beginning to perform in place of the agency, and then the agency being shamed into doing something because it did not feel like there were a lot of people there who cared. I mean, we never heard from some of them. There was never any, we're sorry about what happened to you. We're taking every measure we can to ensure that this doesn't happen again. We're going to speak out against what may have caused this to happen. That never took place.
One of the difficult things for people on the outside is we rarely hear from people who are working inside. That means you and your role in the union is very important. What do you think people inside CDC would want an audience like this to know?
They would want everyone to know that they sacrificed. They sacrificed, I guess you could say, a more stable environment. Some of them sacrificed a larger paycheck. Many of them have sacrificed families, their own mental health, like I said, and all they want to do at the end of the day is to be able to do their job.
Wow. What comes next for you for the CDC?
For me, we will continue to move forward because, some people have said, well, why don't you guys just quiet down a little, put your heads down and see what the next few months bring?
Right. I'm guessing that's not what you're thinking.
We're unable to
That's not a persuasive case.
We don't even know what that looks like. We have no idea. Yeah.
So tell me about that. What do you think should we be aware that you're working on? What is important for people to do to be supportive of the employees of the CDC right now?
What we will do is continue to hold the agency accountable. If that means throwing federal law in their face and, insisting that they follow what federal law says until that law does not exist anymore, that's what we're going to continue doing. If it means media outreach, if it means guiding employees through the process of appealing violations of their federal rights, we're just going to keep doing that. We're not going to go away because the agency says, oh, we no longer recognize you. We are an independent entity, and we will continue operating that way.
Right. What can people do to be helpful to CDC right now?
Be a voice for us. When you hear things that don't sit right with you, that are not right, when you know that there are funding cuts to very important and crucial areas of the country, speak out about it. Say something, because a lot of times the agency figures, if we just keep quiet and we let the union run its mouth, it'll run its course. But when everybody starts speaking up and everybody starts saying something, that's when the change comes.
Yeah, CDC is an agency. Well, sure, let's get that in there. Let me just say that CDC is an agency that has supported all of our health for so long. This is a moment where we really need to support CDC
exactly.
and its employees.
Yes.
That's for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming up to Baltimore.
Thank you for having me.
And for talking to us about this. Please send the message to your employees that we're all here in support of them and the CDC.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
That was part one of today's episode. In part two, Dr. Sharfstein calls President Jacobs back to ask how CDC employees have been faring during the federal government shutdown. Let's listen.
Yolanda Jacobs, it's great to see you again.
And it's great to see you too, Josh.
Now, it's been a couple weeks since we had that conversation at the Bloomberg American Health Summit, and it has been an eventful couple weeks for the CDC.
That it has.
So tell me about the government shutdown.
We kind of figured that we would go into a shutdown. Everything was saying shutdown, shutdown. Of course, that became a reality on October 1st. And since that time, we're right back on track where we were before, where it seems that we have an administration that continues to target its federal employees. So, of course, following the shutdown, there were threats to begin laying off some of the federal workers as long as the shutdown, goes on. And that actually took place on October 10th, where some of the first layoffs received RIF notices late that night and were pretty much locked out of their work computers from that point on. The next day, the administration rescinded some of those terminations. But of course, there are still 600 employees that were impacted by those October 10th RIF notices who have not had theirs rescinded.
So that's a lot of employees. And
Yes.
what kinds of functions do those employees have?
It's all across the agency. So there was like no where you could just sit there and say, okay, I see that they cut this particular area, because it was all over the agency, right down to our HR people. So basically, HR was removed, taken off of furlough, ordered to come back into the office and send out RIF notices, which included RIF notices to themselves. So they basically sent reduction in force notices to themselves as well as to those other affected employees.
How would you characterize morale at the agency at this point?
It's at an all-time low. If you want to see employees whose spirits have been broken, who have been ripped from the mission that a lot of them took an oath to uphold, the mental stress, now the financial stress compounding that, CDC is a horrible place to be at this time. It's not what it used to be. Before, people called it the premier national public health agency. And a lot of those premier people are being steadily ushered out of the door.
And when we talked before, you talked about what people should know and what people can do. Has that changed?
It has not. We have to be very careful and fervent in continuing to humanize, because there's a heavy mental and financial toll that is taking place that it might appear to just be affecting those individuals. But we all know that when things like that happen, it moves out, it extrapolates out into the greater community. So it's not just those people and their families that are going to be suffering behind this. Everyone is going to suffer. The country's going to suffer around the world, where CDC is seen as the voice of certain public health. Everybody is going to suffer for it.
Yolanda Jacobs, thank you so much for coming back to the podcast. And I hope that the next time we talk, there'll be better news to share.
I sure hope so. Thanks.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, and Stephanie Desmond. Audio production by J.B. Arbogast, Michael Bonfils, Spencer Greer, Matthew Martin, and Philip Porter, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production coordination by Catherine Ricardo. Analytics by Elisa Rosen. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.